What's going on, guys? After so much, in fact, a never-ending barrage of bad news, we have a fun little one today. Bitcoin is on track for its best quarter in 2 years. And especially in the context of everything that has happened this year in terms of regulatory attack and Operation Chokepoint 2.0, and just the broader macro space, it's a little shocking to see Bitcoin doing so well. At least it might be. So today we're going to talk about why Bitcoin is thriving, how it compares to other assets, and I think that we need to start this story at the end of last year. Now, 2022 was just a very, very bad year for crypto. There's no denying that. It started early and just kept going. We had the collapse of Luna and the Terra ecosystem. We had Celsius failing. We had Voyager failing. And then, of course, we had the capstone. After all of that, after Three Arrows Capital, we had the capstone of FTX's collapse. And not just their collapse, but the revelation of the unbelievable fraud that intertwined Sam's entire approach to that organization from the very beginning. Now, we knew that there was going to be intense pressure on the crypto industry based on all of those collapses, but certainly sort of really driven by the collapse of FTX. And so you were seeing at the end of last year a lot of price predictions like this, where Bitcoin was going down to 10K or 12K, and it was a completely reasonable thing to think. This was from December of last year. However, that's not what happened. Bitcoin is now up 70% on the year, 71.83% to be exact, and has continued to sort of thrive and make gains, especially in the most recent period of turmoil. So how does this compare to other assets that sometimes trade alongside Bitcoin, or at least are associated with some aspect of the Bitcoin narrative? Well, gold is having an okay year as well. It's up 7.63% year to date, and you can see that gold has certainly had its biggest move in the context of the most recent banking crisis, which I think makes a lot of sense. Now, NASDAQ, which is obviously the tech-heavy sort of index when it comes to stocks, has also had a pretty good year. It's up 14%. And that's obviously less than Bitcoin, but still shows that there's some move there. So what might be the explanation for why Bitcoin is going up the most, but these other assets are going up as well? Well, when it comes to NASDAQ and the stock, we finally have the market. Well, it's not the first time, but the market is getting more convinced that this time they're correct about a Fed pivot coming. And to some extent, that's based on this crisis, right? In the context of a global banking crisis where there are serious liquidity issues, the assumption is that the Fed isn't going to be able to continue the intensity of this rate hiking cycle in quite the same way that they had before. Now, obviously, the Fed did hike the federal funds rate by 25 basis points at the first meeting they had a chance to after the banking crisis began. But in many ways, people saw that as sort of their attempt to say to the markets that they're still hanging on and they're still going to push strongly, while kind of acknowledging that the end might be coming for this tightening cycle. In fact, the market is sort of pricing in that might be the last rate hike and that we will in fact see rate cuts this year. I'm not so sure that we'll see rate cuts. I think that might be the market just getting over exuberant and excited. But I do think that this broader narrative that there is finally an exogenous factor that will force the Fed's hand in the context of global banking liquidity and the duration mismatch issue that we've talked about for the last 3 weeks is coming to the fore and is really kind of driving a little bit more into risk assets that had been the most hampered by the shift to higher interest rates. So one part of this is just sort of the macro context and the alignment that Bitcoin has as a risk asset with the larger sort of risky side of the stock market. The other piece, though, is more Bitcoin specific. You have seen a huge emergence of this narrative that Bitcoin was made for times of banking crisis. And it's not hard to see why. I did an entire show about this. But the reality is that the Genesis block of Bitcoin had a message embedded in it, which intertwined it forever with this question of government overreach in the context of banks, right? Chancellor on the brink of a second bailout for banks. It's not surprising then that there's now narrative momentum behind the idea of Bitcoin being a salve to what's going on in the world right now. And I think the interesting thing is that even if the Bitcoin rally started for more structural reasons. For example, we've talked about Binance moving out of BUSD and into Bitcoin and other crypto assets. And more broadly, just this sort of sense that crypto or stablecoins rather might not be as stable as they seem, especially if they have regulatory issues, as USDC might. Bitcoin becomes a higher priority as the reserve asset of the crypto ecosystem. But the point is that even if it is much more structural reasons like that that are driving the actual sort of initial price increase of Bitcoin, when it comes to narrative making, the fact that this banking crisis was happening at the same time means that to some extent this becomes self-fulfilling prophecy, as in maybe this narrative wasn't the driver for the last set of buyers who pushed Bitcoin's price up, but it very well could be for the next set of buyers. And even if those people aren't buying right now, you got to think that a lot of people have read these mainstream media articles about Bitcoin booming in the wake of bank crisis and filed that information away for later. Now, obviously, not everyone, even in crypto, thinks this is the case. El Capo says markets rise, a false rebound built on sand, unstable ground. And he just thinks that that's not really a sustainable move. He says that smart money isn't buying. He says that Bitcoin isn't a hedge against inflation or disasters yet. And that's why it's aligned with stocks. So that's one take. But the other take, which is worth noting too, is that even if the narratives are wrong, Bitcoiners believe them, and there are a growing number of us, and maybe because of that, there is a price floor that is just unimpeachable. Buco Capital guy says, okay, so I've been dealing with Bitcoin idiots for the last 24 hours, and I'm actually kind of becoming a Bitcoin bull. Here's my logic. They're morons. No facts matter. Nothing will ever change their mind. So there's a floor to the price. Just not sure what that floor is. Listen, man, whatever door you got to take to walk through, we're here when you do. Anyways, guys, that's the news. Bitcoin is on its way to its best quarter in 2 years, up 71%. I like it. All right, guys, talk to you more soon. Peace.